Since 2016, at least 10 people have vanished without a trace while hiking in the uncharted wilderness of America's national parks. Their fate's still a chilling mystery. Are you a hiker? Have you ever thought about the dangers you are exposed to in places where shadows grow long and the unknown lurks just beyond the tree line? Tonight, join us as we delve into two harrowing tales of those who dared to tread where the light of day scarcely reaches. A solitary hiker whose adventurous spirit leads him to an ancient forsaken cabin where horrors that defy comprehension and secrets that hunger for new victims lie. And a young couple whose peaceful hike takes a sinister turn when they are pursued by an enigmatic and relentless presence. In both cases, what begins as a serene escape into nature soon spirals into a nightmarish race for survival. These people don't realize it, but they just stepped into the realm of Mr. Scary Guy. Prepare yourself for a journey beyond the ordinary, into the shadows of your deepest fears. Welcome to the world of Mr. Scary Guy. I've always loved the outdoors. Growing up in a small town surrounded by dense forests, hiking was my escape from the mundane. This story happened a few years ago when I decided to go on a solo hiking trip to clear my mind. It was meant to be a peaceful retreat, but it turned into a nightmare I can never forget. It was late autumn, and the trees were ablaze with shades of red, orange, and yellow. I packed my backpack with all the essentials: food, water, a map, a compass, and a small tent. I chose a trail I'd never explored before, one that was known for its beautiful scenery but also for being less traveled. Perfect for some solitude, or so I thought. The first day was everything I hoped for. The trail was challenging but rewarding, offering breathtaking views of the forest and the distant mountains. I set up camp near a small stream, made a fire, and enjoyed the tranquility. As the sun set, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. Little did I know, this was the calm before the storm. The first strange occurrence happened that night. I woke up around midnight to the sound of footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, circling my tent. I held my breath, listening intently. The steps stopped right outside, and I could hear faint breathing. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what it could be. Maybe it was an animal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I reached for my flashlight and slowly unzipped the tent. I shone the light outside, but there was nothing there. The forest was eerily silent. I convinced myself it was just my imagination and tried to go back to sleep, but it was a restless night. The next day, I continued my hike, trying to shake off the unease from the night before. The trail became steeper and more rugged, and I had to focus on my footing. By late afternoon, I reached a clearing with an old, dilapidated cabin in the center. It looked abandoned for years, with its roof caving in and windows shattered. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to take a closer look. As I approached the cabin, I noticed strange symbols carved into the door. They were unfamiliar and gave me a chill. I pushed the door open, and it creaked loudly, echoing through the empty forest. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decay. The floor was covered in debris, and old, rusted tools hung on the walls. In the corner there was a small table with a dusty journal on it. I picked it up and flipped through the pages. Most of the entries were mundane, detailing the daily life of whoever lived there. But the last few pages were different. They were frantic, filled with paranoid ramblings about being watched and hunted by something in the woods. A sense of dread washed over me, and I decided it was time to leave. As I stepped outside, I felt like I was being watched. I looked around, but there was no one there. The feeling persisted as I made my way back to the trail. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my heart skip a beat. I quickened my pace, wanting to put as much distance between myself and that cabin as possible. As dusk approached, I found a spot to set up camp. I chose a location far from the trail, hoping it would give me some sense of security. That night, the forest was unnaturally quiet. No owls hooting, no insects chirping, just silence. I built a fire, hoping it would keep whatever was out there at bay. But as the night wore on, the sense of being watched grew stronger. Around midnight, the footsteps returned. This time, they were more aggressive, like someone running through the forest. They stopped right outside my tent, and I heard a low, guttural growl. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my flashlight and knife, ready to defend myself. I unzipped the tent and shone the light outside. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and shadows. The growling stopped, but the oppressive feeling of being watched remained. I didn't sleep at all that night. As soon as dawn broke, I packed up my things and started back down the trail. I was exhausted, but adrenaline kept me moving. I needed to get out of those woods. The hike back was grueling. The trail seemed more difficult than before, like it was trying to keep me there. I stumbled and fell several times, scraping my hands and knees. But I didn't care. I just wanted to get out. As I neared the trailhead, I felt a glimmer of hope. But that hope was shattered when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, carved into a tree, were the same strange symbols I'd seen on the cabin door. Fresh, like they'd just been made. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. How could someone have gotten ahead of me? And why were they leaving these symbols? Panic set in, and I broke into a run. I didn't care about the trail anymore. I just wanted to get to my car and leave. But the forest seemed to close in around me, the trees growing denser, the shadows deeper. I could hear the footsteps again, matching my pace, never falling behind. Finally, I broke through the tree line and saw the parking lot. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. My car, which I'd left locked and secured, had its windows shattered. The tires were slashed, and those same symbols were carved into the hood. I was trapped. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Desperation took over, and I started running down the road, hoping to find someone, anyone, who could help. But the road was deserted. I ran for what felt like hours, my legs burning, my lungs aching. As night fell, I found myself back in the forest. I had somehow gone in a circle. Exhausted and terrified, I knew I couldn't keep running. I found a large tree and climbed up, hoping it would offer some protection. As I settled onto a branch, I heard the footsteps again. They circled the base of the tree, slow and deliberate. I stayed as still as possible, barely breathing. Hours passed, and the footsteps never left. I could feel my body giving out, but I knew I couldn't come down. At some point, I must have fallen asleep out of sheer exhaustion. When I woke up, it was dawn. The footsteps were gone, but the symbols were carved into the tree trunk, right below where I was sitting. With renewed determination, I climbed down and started walking again. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to keep moving. Eventually, I stumbled upon a ranger station. I must have looked like a madman, covered in dirt and blood, babbling about symbols and footsteps. But the ranger took me in, gave me water, and called for help. It took days for me to fully comprehend what had happened. The authorities found my car, but no trace of whoever, or whatever, had been stalking me. They chalked it up to a bear or some other animal, but I knew better. There was something in those woods, something that didn't want me to leave. I haven't gone hiking since. The forest, once my sanctuary, is now a place of nightmares. I still see those symbols in my dreams, and I can't shake the feeling of being watched. If you ever find yourself in those woods, be careful. You might not come out. That's my story. Believe it or not, it's up to you. But I hope it serves as a warning. Some places are meant to be left alone. I still remember that weekend like it was yesterday. even though it happened nearly 2 years ago. My girlfriend Jane and I had planned a hiking trip in the remote forests of the Pacific Northwest. We were both outdoor enthusiasts, always looking for new trails and adventures. This time, we decided to explore a lesser-known trail that promised breathtaking views and a peaceful escape from our busy lives. We arrived at the trailhead early on a Friday morning. The sky was a clear blue, the air was crisp, and the forest was alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. The first few hours of our hike were perfect. The scenery was beautiful, and we felt completely at peace. We didn't see another soul on the trail, which was exactly what we were hoping for. As the day went on, we ventured deeper into the forest. The trail became narrower and less maintained. We found ourselves pushing through thick underbrush and climbing over fallen trees. It was challenging, but we were loving every minute of it. By late afternoon, we decided to set up camp near a small, secluded clearing by a creek. The sound of the water flowing was soothing, and we quickly settled into our routine of setting up the tent and gathering firewood. As dusk fell, we sat by the fire, cooking our dinner and talking about our plans for the next day. The sky darkened, and the forest around us grew quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. It was then that we heard the first strange noise. It was a faint rustling, almost imperceptible, but it made us both pause and look around. "Probably just an animal," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Jane nodded, but I could see a hint of unease in her eyes. We tried to brush it off and continued with our evening, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Later that night, as we lay in our tent, we heard it again. This time, it was louder and closer. A distinct crunching sound like someone, or something, was walking through the underbrush. Jane clutched my arm, her eyes wide with fear.
"Did you hear that?"
she whispered. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's probably just a deer or something." But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The sounds were too deliberate, too heavy for a small animal. We lay there in silence, listening. The noises continued for a while, then stopped abruptly. Eventually, exhaustion overcame our fear, and we fell into a restless sleep. The next morning we woke up early, eager to shake off the unease from the night before. We packed up our camp and continued on the trail. The day was bright and sunny, and the strange noises from the night seemed like a distant memory. We hiked for several hours, enjoying the beauty of the forest and the thrill of exploring new terrain. As we stopped for lunch by a large moss-covered rock, I noticed something odd. There were fresh footprints in the soft earth, leading off the trail and into the dense woods. They were large, much larger than either of ours. "Hey, Jane, take a look at this," I said, pointing to the tracks. She frowned as she examined them.
"Do you think someone else is out here?"
"I don't know," I replied, "but these tracks are fresh. Whoever made them can't be too far ahead." We decided to follow the footprints for a while, curious to see where they led. They took us deeper into the forest, away from the main trail. The further we went, the more uneasy I felt. It was as if we were being drawn into a trap. After about an hour of hiking, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. It was hidden in a dense thicket, almost completely overgrown with vines and moss. The windows were broken, and the door hung loosely on its hinges. A sense of dread washed over me as I stared at the dilapidated structure.
"Let's go back,"
Jane said, her voice trembling.
"I don't like this place."
I agreed. There was something deeply unsettling about the cabin. We turned to leave, but as we did, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure was standing just inside the tree line, watching us. It was tall and shadowy, and I couldn't make out any details. "Jane, we need to go. Now," I said, grabbing her hand. We hurried back the way we came, our pace quickening with every step. I glanced back several times, but the figure was gone. By the time we reached the main trail, we were both on edge. We decided to cut our trip short and head back to the car. The sense of being watched never left us, and every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made us jump. As we neared the trailhead, we saw something that stopped us in our tracks. Our car, which we had left parked at the edge of the forest, was now surrounded by deep, fresh footprints, the same ones we had seen earlier. It was as if someone had been circling the car, waiting for us. "Get in the car," I said, my voice shaking. We quickly threw our gear into the back seat and jumped in. As I fumbled with the keys, Jane let out a gasp. I looked up to see the shadowy figure standing at the edge of the forest, just a few yards away. It was watching us, its face hidden in the shadows. I finally managed to start the car, and we sped away, leaving the figure behind. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest town. We found a motel and checked in, both of us too shaken to talk about what had happened. That night, as we lay in the safety of our motel room, we tried to make sense of the events. Who was that figure? Why were they following us? And what would have happened if we hadn't left when we did? We never found out the answers to those questions. And to this day, the memory of that weekend haunts us. We've since learned that the forest where we were hiking has a dark history. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances. Some say it's haunted. Others believe there's something, or someone, living in those woods, preying on unsuspecting hikers. Jane and I haven't been back to the forest since. We've continued our hiking adventures, but we're much more cautious now. That weekend taught us that the wilderness, as beautiful and serene as it can be, also holds its own secrets and dangers, and sometimes it's better to leave those mysteries unexplored. Hope tonight's eerie stories kept you on the edge of your seat, and do be careful if you are thinking about taking a hike. Share your reactions in the comments, and if you've got a haunting tale, send it over. And always remember, fear lurks in the shadows. This is Mr. Scary Guy saying, sleep tight.